The heat does not merely descend, it colonizes. July 1858. London is a pressure cooker of brick and soot, and the sun is a white-hot iron pressed against the city's throat. You wake up, but there is no morning air. Instead, a thick, invisible weight settles in your lungs. It tastes of copper, bile, and ancient rot. You try to swallow, but your throat is coated in a fine, greasy film. This is the breath of the Thames. This is the vapor of 2 million bowels, cooking under a relentless sky. Listen, the city is unnaturally quiet. The usual roar of the docks has been strangled by the stench. People move with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, their eyes watering, their skin slick with a cold, sickly sweat. You step outside, and the smell hits you like a physical blow to the solar plexus. It isn't just a bad odor. It's an assault. It's the concentrated essence of every dead cat, every bucket of night soil, and every gallon of industrial acid ever dumped into the mud. Look at the river. The water has ceased to be water. It is a viscous obsidian soup, moving with the sluggishness of cooling lava. The tide retreats, and it leaves behind a gift, the bank, not of sand, but of fermenting human waste, 6 feet deep in places, bubbling and hissing as the heat triggers a ghastly fermentation. A black carpet of flies, millions of them, shimmers across the surface of the muck. From a distance, the riverbank seems to be breathing. It isn't. It's just the maggots. I am not here to tell you a story about a bad summer. I am here to show you how the greatest empire on earth almost choked to death on its own excrement. You think you know what filth is. You don't. You live in a world of bleached porcelain and silent pipes. In 1858, the veil was stripped away. The city was a patient with a ruptured gut, and the surgeons were too busy counting coins to notice the gangrene. By the time you finish this, the next glass of water you drink will feel like a gamble. London was a victim of its own success. A sprawling, bloated titan of 2.5 million souls, all packed into a footprint designed for a fraction of that number. For centuries, the solution was simple: the cesspit, a hole in the ground, usually under the floorboards or in the tiny backyard. There were over 200,000 of them. Some hadn't been emptied in decades. They leaked. They seeped into the foundations. They turned the very soil of London into a saturated sponge of filth. Then came the innovation that doomed the city, the flushing toilet. The Victorians loved their progress. They installed the Brahma closets by the thousands. But they forgot one thing. The pipes didn't go to a treatment plant. They went to the old medieval sewers, which were designed for rainwater. Suddenly, those sewers were forced to carry a tidal wave of raw human waste directly into the Thames. The river, which provided the city's drinking water, became its primary intestinal tract. You see the irony? The cleaner the rich felt in their bathrooms, the more poisonous the city became. History prefers to sanitize this. It speaks of urban development and sanitation reform. I call it negligence on a biblical scale. The authorities knew the water was killing people. Cholera had already scythed through the slums in 1848 and 1854. Dr. John Snow had already pointed his finger at the Broad Street pump. But the medical establishment, blinded by their own arrogance, clung to the miasma theory. They believed the smell was the disease. They were wrong about the science, but that summer, the smell became so powerful it may as well have been a god. If you have the stomach to keep descending into this pit with me, leave your mark. Hit the like button now. It is the price of admission to the morgue. Only those with a taste for the unfiltered truth survived the walk through 1858. The city was a ticking bomb. The heat wave of 58 was the spark. For 3 weeks, the temperature stayed above 30 degrees Celsius. In a city of stone and coal smoke, that is a death sentence. The Thames dropped to record lows. The night soil men, the poor devils who earned a living emptying cesspits, couldn't keep up. The price of lime skyrocketed. The city was drowning in its own refuse, and the elite sat in their mansions, convinced that their wealth would act as a barrier against the rot. They were about to learn that the river does not discriminate. Step onto the Victoria embankment. No, don't look at the horizon. Look at your feet. The mud is a mosaic of horrors. Here, a bloated dog, its fur sloughing off in the heat. There, a pile of offal from the tanneries, turning a bruised purple under the sun. The air is so thick with the effluvia that it feels like eating. Every breath is a mouthful of the city's ghosts. Let's perform a dissection of the water itself. If you were to dip a glass into the Thames in July 1858, you wouldn't see liquid. You would see a suspended nightmare. It was a gray-brown sludge, teeming with life that shouldn't exist. This was the tea that Londoners drank. The water companies pumped it directly from the tidal reaches. They filtered it through sand, a pathetic gesture, like trying to stop a flood with a lace handkerchief. The process of the stink was a ritual of chemistry. The heat catalyzed the anaerobic breakdown of the organic matter. The river began to produce hydrogen sulfide and ammonia in such quantities that the air became corrosive. It turned silver spoons black in the drawers of nearby houses. It stripped the paint off the hulls of ships. Now, imagine what it was doing to the delicate lining of a human lung. The industrial grinder wasn't just about factories. It was the mechanical processing of human life into waste. The hospitals were overflowing, not with the wounded, but with the wasted, men and women turning blue, their bodies purging every drop of fluid in the violent spasms of cholera. The Blue Death. And yet, the doctors walked the wards with sponges soaked in vinegar, blaming the bad air while they drank the very water that carried the vibrio bacteria. The flies. We must talk about the flies. They were the true masters of London that summer. They didn't just buzz. They swarmed in clouds so dense they obscured the sun. They fed on the river, then flew into the open windows of the wealthy. They landed on the sugar cubes, the meat, the lips of sleeping children. They were the messengers of the Thames, carrying the gospel of the gutter into the dining rooms of the aristocracy. There was no escape. Even the Windsor air was tainted. The Queen herself attempted a pleasure cruise on the river. She lasted 5 minutes. She fled back to her palace with a handkerchief pressed to her royal nose, finally realizing that the great stink was not a legend told by the poor. It was a biological uprising. The turning point didn't happen in a laboratory. It happened in the House of Commons. The majestic Gothic palace stands directly on the riverbank. For years, the members of Parliament had ignored the petitions of the unwashed. They had dismissed the cries of the starving and the sick. But in June 1858, the river came for them. The stench inside the halls of Westminster became so aggressive that business ground to a halt. Imagine the scene. The most powerful men in the world, the architects of an empire that spanned the globe, huddled in their chambers, gagging. They tried to fight back with chemistry. They soaked the heavy leather curtains in chloride of lime. The result was a stinging, acrid fog that burned their eyes and made it impossible to breathe. They looked like ghosts. Lord Derby, the Prime Minister, was seen fleeing a committee room with his hand over his face, unable to speak. The law lords abandoned their benches. There was talk of moving the entire government to Oxford or St. Albans. The great stink had done what no foreign army could. It had forced the British government to retreat. The irony is delicious, isn't it? The very men who profited from the industrial chaos were now being suffocated by its byproduct. They were literally eating the filth they had allowed to flow past the slums. The history books try to hide these details. They want you to remember the statues and the wars. I bring you the things they burned. If you want to see the truth behind the lace and the top hats, subscribe. Don't let me dig through these graves alone. Suddenly, the impossible cost of a new sewer system didn't seem so high. Joseph Bazalgette, a man who had been shouting into the wind for years, was finally given the keys to the city. He didn't want to save lives. He wanted to solve an engineering problem. He designed a system of 82 miles of main intercepting sewers and 1,100 miles of street sewers. It was a gargantuan task, the largest civil engineering project of the century. But even as the bricks were being laid, the stink persisted. It was a reminder, a warning. The city was a living organism, and if you stop the blood from flowing, the body dies. The great stink was the city's final desperate scream for help. The rains finally came in late August. The temperature dropped. The Thames surged, washing the worst of the black carpet out to the North Sea. The immediate crisis passed, and London breathed again. Bazalgette's sewers eventually transformed the city, virtually eliminating cholera and creating the blueprint for the modern world. We owe our survival to a summer of unbearable nausea, but don't be fooled by the happy ending. The great stink wasn't a freak accident. It was the logical conclusion of human greed and scientific arrogance. We think we are different. We think our clean world is permanent. But underneath every gleaming sidewalk in London, New York, or Paris, the same dark ritual continues. We have just hidden the pipes better. The water you drink today is recycled. It has been through a dozen bodies before it reaches your glass. We have conquered the stink, but have we conquered the neglect? Or are we just waiting for the next heat wave to peel back the floorboards and show us what we've been hiding? The Thames is cleaner now. Fish have returned. But on a hot July afternoon, if you stand by the mud at low tide near Westminster, there is a certain scent, a heavy metallic sweetness. A ghost of 1858. It is the smell of a city that almost ate itself. If you were a member of Parliament in 1858, would you have fled the city to save yourself, or stayed to face the poison you helped create? Tell me in the comments, but be honest. Most of you would have run.